From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following.
The West Virginia High Technology Consortium Foundation, diversifying West Virginia's economy through technological innovation and development at the Fairmont I-79 Technology Park, now with locations in downtown Wheeling, Moundsville, and Glenville.
Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, the Senate's new Select Committee working on issues relating to child poverty held its first meeting at the Capitol. It was also Marshall University Day at the Legislature as higher education faces budget cuts. And we'll talk with the minority leaders, Senator Mike Hall and Delegate Tim Armstead, tonight on the Legislature Today. And good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Governor Tomlin today issued an executive order directing the state's coal industry to stand down. The order came after the 6th fatal mining accident since November. Operators and miners must thoroughly review all health and safety laws and regulations, communications protocols, and other safety issues at their operations for 24 hours. The governor said the state's coal mining industry can thrive only if mining operations are conducted as safely as possible and in accordance with mandatory health and safety laws and regulations aimed at preventing accidents. The governor's order comes after a miner was struck by a scoop and killed last night at Pocahontas Coal Company's Affinity Mine near Sophia. At the Legislature today, the House of Delegates spent a great deal of its floor session arguing over the state budget and spending priorities. It was all about a bill to equalize the salaries of county magistrates and their staffs. Dave Mistich reports.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pretty simple bill, really. This bill equalizes the pay among the magistrates, the magistrate court clerks, and the deputy clerks among all 55 counties.
Yet the passage of House Bill 2434, which proposes equal pay for magistrates around the state, was anything but simple for Delegate Tim Miley of Harrison County. Republicans and Democrats labored over the issue with questions and pleas, which led to a debate over everything from budget implications to the priorities of the House chamber. Delegate Darrell Coles of Morgan County kicked off the marathon discussion of the magistrate equal pay bill.
This magistrate pay raise bill comes with a $737,000 price tag to working West Virginia families and taxpayers. And to be clear, it's a base building annual $737,000 price tag. Meanwhile, we face crushing Medicaid costs, diminishing coal severance taxes, and the lowest workforce participation in the nation. My question is, does this magistrate pay raise price tag have a higher priority for us than the budget cuts we face?
Delegate Mike Caputo pointed out that the legislature has no authority over the Supreme Court's budget.
But you do realize that when the judicial branch tells us what they need in their budget, we are obligated to fulfill that budget, correct?
I understand the way it
And
works.
so if they've asked for that money and it is in their budget in anticipating of equalizing this pay, you do realize we can't take that money from them and use it for anything else. Is that correct?
Well, you realize this is a base building budget appropriation.
I don't think you answered my question.
The debate continued as the House heard from delegates from both sides of the aisle, with some Republicans arguing that some magistrates have a higher caseload than others and thus shouldn't be compensated the same. House Democrats, however, argued for equal pay. Delegate Linda Phillips of Wyoming County was concerned about the magistrates and their staffs from her district.
This is not a pay raise for elected officials. This is a bill to restore the salary of magistrates, clerks, assistants, and deputy clerks in my district. Wyoming and McDowell are two of the 4 counties that lost population in the census. Wyoming by only 468 people. Because of that, we fell to the different tier. That dropped us down. So when we fell to the lower tier, the support staff is who I'm most concerned with. They lost approximately $5,000 annually in their salary.
Many delegates asked Finance Chair Harry Keith White to clarify how a vote on the bill might impact the budget otherwise, including Delegate Ricky Moy of Raleigh County.
If we vote no against this, what can we use the money for?
There's nothing in this bill, if we vote no, that we will be able, as a legislature, to pull out and use back in this budget that we're working on now. This is the Supreme Court's budget. It's my understanding there's enough money in this budget to carry forward almost 4 years forward to take care of salary for our magistrates across the state of West Virginia.
White also fielded questions from House Minority Leader Tim Armstead.
If we don't approve this, that money stays in then and would not be necessarily expended for these pay raises. Is that correct? I mean, it would stay in the fund for the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
It stays in the balances of the court's funds, yes, sir.
And so next year, that money would either be swept or it would stay in the budget and could be applied to next year's budget. Is that correct?
That would be at the election of the court when they put their budget together and decide on what the budget's going to be.
Near the end of the debate, Delegate Patrick Lane took to the microphone. He motioned on Monday's floor session to have the bill rejected on first reading.
Ladies and gentlemen, why this bill and why now? Contrary to what we've heard this morning, this is not about equalization because quite honestly, when I knew the answer upstairs, I still asked the question, did the Supreme Court endorse equalizing pay at the lower tier level? No, that wasn't the equalization. Did they endorse equalizing at the mid level? No. What the Supreme Court endorsed was a pay raise.
Finally, Delegate Miley spoke one last time before the bill went to vote. After more than 90 minutes of debate, where the House heard from more than 20 delegates, House Bill 2434 passed with a 53-45 vote. If the bill passes the Senate, equal pay for magistrates across the state will go into effect on July 1st of this year. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
The Senate unanimously passed 2 bills today, one dealing with the disqualification of jurors, and the second further defining graffiti crimes and their penalties. But the Senate also held the first meeting of the new special committee to address childhood poverty. And as Ashton Mara reports, its members are well aware that they're taking on an issue that won't be solved overnight.
When preparing for the legislative session, Senate President Jeff Kessler says he looked at a variety of issues he knew would garner attention. The growth of Medicaid in the budget, the lack of labor participation, prison overcrowding, the high occurrences of teen pregnancy, and the high school dropout rate. And he says he found they all had a common basis: childhood poverty.
That a lot of the common denominator, a lot of the societal ills we have start with childhood poverty. The kids, when they don't grow up healthy with an opportunity, with a good education, because of the fact that they're born up poor, many times through no fault of their own, obviously, that they don't have the opportunity then to succeed and participate in our society and in our economy, etc., in our government.
That's why Kessler and Senate Majority Chair John Unger of Berkeley County worked together to form the Select Committee on Childhood Poverty, a committee Unger says is unlike any currently in the Senate.
The special committee is meant to bring together leaders from across the aisle, from all areas of experience, to do one thing: focus on the child.
Members include committee chairs from education, finance, judiciary, health, and agriculture, as well as the minority and majority leaders. Kessler says they were all included to come up with a more holistic approach to helping the 30% of West Virginia children currently living in poverty.
So we can take a view from above, so to speak, from the airplane view of the problem and look at it in a more comprehensive manner. And hopefully with the idea that it will take a sustained, long-term focus and commitment of the legislature to address the issue and to effectively deal with it.
Today, the committee heard from leaders of 2 nonprofit organizations. Margie Hale, executive director of WV Kids Count, presented data on teen pregnancy rates in the state, while Dr. Pat Cashumo, president and CEO of the Education Alliance, spoke about the link between poor academic achievement and poverty. Education reform has already become a clear priority for this session, but Unger says the childhood poverty rate in the state is a contributing factor. He says we'll never see the growth in student achievement we're looking for if we don't reach out to the child that needs help at home.
If we talk about student achievement, how can we expect a child to achieve on the math test or English test or whatever if they're not present in the classroom, but they're thinking about what they're going to go home to and if they're going to have enough food to eat? So we really have to, if we're going to want to have a student achievement, we got to get in there and help that child so they don't have this adverse childhood experience that leads them into other problems later on as adults.
But Kessler and Unger both agree that poverty is not an issue that has a quick fix. Unger says it has taken years to get to this point, and government and community leaders must make a long-term commitment to reverse the problem.
We have to change a culture. We have to change a lifestyle. We have to look at and provide that alternative so that people have a healthy lifestyle. Children are living in healthy conditions. And that's going to take time, and that's going to take all of us.
The committee will meet once a week during the session, but also during interims and at any other point they deem necessary throughout the next 2 years. But Unger, who serves as committee chair, says this group is not stationary. He will take his committee meetings out into communities across the state to hear their solutions as well. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
There was plenty of Kelly green and white in the halls of the state capitol today as it was Marshall University Day at the legislature. Suzanne Higgins reports officials were touting accomplishments as well as defining the consequences of upcoming budget cuts.
A good-sized crowd gathered outside of the House and Senate chambers today to visit multiple displays set up to help celebrate Marshall University Day at the Capitol. The university took the opportunity to showcase its growth as a research facility through the support of the state's Research Trust Fund.
What we're standing in front of right now is a series of placards describing the endowments that have been created to support research at Marshall University through the state's Research Trust Fund, the so-called Bucks for Brains program. And out of that program, we have 15 new endowments, 11 of them to support faculty research, 4 of them to support student scholarships directed at research. It's really a transformative program. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to be available every year in perpetuity to support the types of research done at Marshall University, directed at the problems of central concern to Appalachians in terms of health disparities, river research, environmental research, safety research, all across the university, from the School of Medicine to the School of Engineering, to biology, to chemistry. And so now Marshall University overall has a research endowment of $30 million going forward to do the good work that it does. It's a pretty happy day. It really is.
Marshall officials were also highlighting the recent restructuring of academic programming.
We have a new undergraduate core curriculum in place. We are developing a new assessment plan, and we've done a lot in terms of our retention and student success efforts as well. We're having some very good growth in terms of new buildings on campus, capital projects. We have a new biotech incubator building that's going up that's been supported by the state legislature and by private funding. We have lots of things happening with our arts department and our arts program in downtown Huntington, so we're doing a lot.
But the challenges for Marshall and all of higher education are looming. The 7.5% budget cut that all state agencies are facing actually comes to 8.94% for higher ed.
The public universities of the state and the public colleges of the state have been asked to make up the reduction in state funding for the Promise Scholarship and need-based grants that the state provides. So that takes you up to 8.94%. Now, the interesting part about this is that in the most recent publication on financial aid by the Higher Education Policy Commission, $11 million of the grant program and the Promise Scholarship go to private higher education institutions, and we're being asked to backfill that as well, which I'm having trouble with, to be honest with you. I don't think our students should be asked to pay higher tuition to subsidize something like that.
President Kopp says the university has been streamlining operations, consolidating a few schools, and not hiring to replace those who retire. But he says in the end, there will be cost shifting.
We as a nation have understood the importance of educating generations that follow us and how vital that is to the future of this nation. we seem to be retrenching on that commitment. And we can listen to people talking about how we have to do this more efficiently, that more efficiently. But when you look at the fact that there are many, many people who are employed by the universities, the rate of return for every dollar of state investment is over 20 to 1 at Marshall. So for every dollar the state invests, we return $20 in economic development and growth in the state. I'd take that return on just about anything. So what it means for the families and for the students is they're going to pay more, real simply.
For the Legislature Today, I'm Suzanne Higgins at the Capitol.
Next, the Republican response to Governor Tomlin's State of the State address a week ago. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 325 to create a loan forgiveness program for all health professionals within the Bureau of Public Health for actual costs paid for tuition, reasonable education expenses, and reasonable living expenses related to the graduate or undergraduate education of a healthcare professional. Senate Bill 326 to establish a process for making appropriation requests for the state system of higher education based on progress toward meeting established objectives. This bill was recommended for passage by the Select Committee on Outcomes-Based Funding Models in Higher Education. Senate Bill 327 permits certification of certain out-of-state school bus operators and requires recertification of school bus operators every 3 years. And Senate Bill 333 to permit persons who have been issued state licenses to carry concealed deadly weapons to carry those weapons on the grounds of the state capitol complex, except for the 3rd and 4th floors of the east wing of the Capitol building, where the West Virginia Supreme Court is located. There are no bills up for consideration on the Senate floor tomorrow. Governor Tomlin presented his legislative agenda last week. Tonight, the Republicans present theirs. Joining us is Senator Mike Hall, a financial advisor from Putnam County. Senator Hall was first elected to the House in 1994 and the Senate in 2006. Delegate Tim Armstead was first appointed to the House in 1998 and later elected that same year. He is an attorney from Kanawha County. Gentlemen, welcome. So glad you're here. First of all, Senator Hall, that magistrate's pay bill's coming over to your side. How do you feel about that?
Well, from what I'm hearing, it may not get an airing on the Senate side. But I've got to hear the debate. Obviously, my fellow delegate here, they made some good points. I mean, this is the time of economic trouble. Pay raise bills don't sit well, and then there are other issues there. But I'm hearing there's not a whole lot of appetite for that bill on our side. I don't know. That can change over time, but you kind of hear those things, as you know.
All right. Delegate Armstead, number one priority for the minority party this year?
Well, obviously we have nearly 60,000 of our fellow West Virginians out of work, and we have additional West Virginians who are still not even looking for work anymore, and they're not even included in those figures. And a number of West Virginians who are working 2 jobs to try to make ends meet. So jobs are our number one priority, and we believe that's a factor of making revisions to our tax structure, our building our infrastructure, certainly our education system, and our legal and regulatory climate. And we have proposals in all those areas that we think would help make West Virginia a place where people can stay here, work, and raise their families, and that's our number one goal.
The governor also said there must be a continued focus on job creation, lowering the cost of doing business in the state, and eliminating inequities in our system. What do the Republicans specifically propose to deal with job creation?
Well, I think we have some tax provisions on our books that are so bad that when we go out and try to attract jobs in West Virginia, we actually make exceptions to those, or we lease equipment or buy equipment and lease it back to companies. So there are some very antiquated provisions on in our tax structure that need to be eliminated. Plus, we need to make sure that we have a regulatory process that is fair, a legal climate, a legal process that's fair. People need to have an automatic right of appeal if they invest in West Virginia, whether they're a plaintiff or a defendant. They need to know that if they feel they're treated unfairly in our court system, they have their day in court. They have an automatic right of appeal. So those are some of the things that we think are very important, and certainly education is a priority for us as well.
Senator Hall, what would you want to see in the governor's education reform bill? It's not out yet, but we're anxiously awaiting it.
Well, there were certain specifics that I know are going to be where the hotbed of controversy is going to be, but they center around how how the local boards and maybe the local building administrators have the capacity to put in the building who they need there or want there, feels qualified to be there. And it gets after Chapter 18A, they call it, this section. And I'm sure that that's where there's a lot of interest because, and then there's this discussion about nepotism and, going back to the old days. But I'm not fearful of that for the fact that in the old days, things could be done in the dark. But today with your programs and internet and everything that's done is practically known by everybody in a community. So that I think there's sort of a self-regulating capacity in our society today that if you give local boards more control over who gets there and how they remain there, I think they're going to pay a price if they don't do the job well. So I think we do need to kind of get in I don't want to say in the 21st century on this, but we need to look. And I think that's what when I looked at the language of the speech, he was very specific about that. So, and I've heard, obviously there are other parts, but that's one part that I think will be really important. My wife, having been a building administrator for years, I'm somewhat familiar with that issue.
Okay. Do the Democrats respond when you say tax cuts? For years you talked about the food tax. That's now off. Other taxes also came down. Do the Democrats respond when the Republicans say, look, folks, our business climate is just not good enough. We've got to work harder on it?
Well, not so far. I don't believe. Okay. I mean, I think, I'm glad we were able to get the food tax reduction. That'll go away in July of this year, and that was something that we worked very hard on. But I think there are some very fundamental changes that need to be made that we've talked about. These are parts of two tax studies, one by Governor Underwood, one by Governor Manchin. This is a job-killing tax, for example, the equipment inventory tax, and we still haven't seen action on that. So we've been disappointed, but we've come up with, we think, some very creative solutions of how we can help offset the tax loss to the school systems and the counties. We want to sit down. We've asked to have an opportunity to sit down with the governor and talk about this, and have shared it with the Democrat leadership. So we're hopeful that we'll see some movement on that this year. If not, we feel it's a real missed opportunity to create jobs in West Virginia. And we're last in terms of the participation of our citizens in the workforce in the country. And there are certainly things we can do to fix that, and we need to work together as Republicans and Democrats to do that.
Can you work together under the partisanship that we saw today? Very quickly.
Well, I mean, truthfully, I think that today's discussion, we try to keep it basically on the issue of whether it's right to do pay raises right now when we are already cutting $75 million out of our budget. Okay. I think we want to try to keep the focus on the issues and not the personalities. It sometimes gets to those, but. But
we're going to have to stop it there. But Delegate Armstead and Senator Hall, I hope you come back mid-session and we'll talk again soon, all right? Thank you very much. And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Today, House Bill 2560 to allow a person who is licensed to carry a concealed deadly weapon in another state to possess the weapon on premises of educational facilities. House Bill 2561 to allow for proof of current military service or honorable discharge by any branch of the United States military, reserve, or National Guard as equivalent experience toward completion of the training requirement for a concealed weapons license. House Bill 2563 to reduce the daily administrative time required of school counselors from 1/4 to 1/10, and increasing the time actually spent in counseling at-risk students and other pupils from 75% to 90%. House Bill 2562 to provide official ballot status to a political party that has received at least 1% of the votes in the preceding general election for a statewide office, or has at least 1,000 voters registered as members of that party. House Bill 2572 to clarify a person may possess a handgun for self-protection while hunting or engaging in other recreational activities. House Bill 2577 to update and revise the laws governing the practice of pharmacy. And House Bill 2578 to create the Good Jobs Internet Reporting Act The bill requires the reporting of job creation and retention data to the Department of Revenue. It requires that department to report the data to the legislature and to publish the reports on the Internet. On second reading in the House tomorrow, the amendment stage, House Bill 2471, to prohibit the restriction of otherwise lawful possession, use, carrying, or display of a firearm or ammunition during a declared state of emergency under the emergency powers of the governor, or by any political subdivision of the state declaring a state of emergency. This has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow we'll meet West Virginia's new Attorney General. Patrick Morrisey was elected in November and took office on January 14th. We welcome your comments. You can send them to feedback@wvpubcast.org. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following.
The West Virginia High Technology Consortium Foundation, diversifying West Virginia's economy through technological innovation and development at the Fairmont I-79 Technology Park. Now with locations in downtown Wheeling, Moundsville, and Glenville.
Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.